Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, 2022 Trends in Search Marketing. I am Andrea Rosman, your webinar host from Main Street ROI. With me is my teammate, Heather Frederick, who is going to be keeping an eye on your questions during the webinar. Just a little bit of housekeeping so we get things in order, and this will help as more people come on. The presentation is going to be about 40 to 45 minutes so that we can leave plenty of time at the end for a live Q&A. Feel free to type any questions you have during the webinar in the questions box, and we will get back to them at the end of the webinar. Good time to turn off cell phones. As always, our webinars are recorded, so we're going to send out a replay of the video along with the PDF of the slides to everyone who has signed up. So we understand you're going to get calls, especially if you're at work, you might get pulled away. Don't worry, you're not going to miss anything. That is the best part about it. We are excited to welcome back our speakers today. Frederick Vallaeys, he's the CEO of Optmyzr. Mike Roberts, CEO of SpyFu, and Andrea Volpini, the CEO of WordLift. And generally, what we're going to be covering is the top search market trends for 2022, what you need to do based on these trends, and of course, our live Q&A after. So let's jump in and get started. And our first speaker is Fred.
Thank you so much. Hey, you're as you may be presenter, it's asking to share my screen, which I would rather not do right now. You can stay with those slides.
Sorry about that. Let me fix that real quick. Hi.
All right, there we go. Okay, hey, well, thanks everyone for joining. It's good to be back doing these sessions after a very long time. And the start of 2022, right? So we got a lot of new stuff happening in search marketing and PPC and SEO. So we're going to talk about some of that today. So if we can go to the next slide. My name is Fred Vallaeys, one of the 3 co-founders, as well as the CEO here at Optmyzr. And I don't have control. There we go. Next slide. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk about what's happening in PPC, and basically it's about unleveling the playing field. And I'm going to put that into context in just a minute here. But one thing we've all certainly noticed is that Google continues to make more and more automation available in how you run ads. And then, for example, recently, performance max campaigns have come up. So this is yet another thing that Google is doing to automate how you run ads and basically makes it easier for everyone. So I'm going to talk about how you can unlevel that leveling playing field and tilt it back in your favor. But to do that, you're going to have to go through what I think is the biggest mind shift in the history of how PPC has been done. So if we look at the next slide, what do I know about the history of PPC? So I've been in PPC I've been doing it since 1998. So a tremendously long time. We can skip to the next slide here. So started advertising on GoTo back in the day when I was still in the dorm room in Stanford, and then I joined Google in 2002. There we go. That's me. So that's what I looked like in my days at Google. I still look pretty decent. The pandemic hasn't been too bad on me. But
Fred,
yeah.
I just want to interrupt. You should be able to flip the slides yourself.
I do not see the control.
Okay.
So if it's all right, I'll just say next slide, if that's okay. Because unfortunately I don't see. I'll try clicking on it, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, so, and I'm really excited this week because I just launched my second book about PPC. So it's called Unleveling the Playing Field. So obviously what we're going to cover here in about 15 minutes. If you want to go in more detail, that book is available on Amazon this week. And for launch week, we're pricing it at $1.99 on the Kindle version. So that's a good discount from what it usually is at. Yeah, and I think I actually changed the slide myself. Fantastic. So the whole thing with automation and is if you just like Google automate stuff for you, it works really well. And here's a study that was done by Boston Consulting Group in 2019. And basically, they say that if you use automation, you're going to boost your revenues and your potential by about 20% from using advanced technology. But you could leave it right there and be just as good as everyone else. But you, as humans who actually care about digital marketing and who are care enough to be on webinars like this one today, if you bring your human insight in addition to the automation technology, you're going to increase the output by another 15%. So it's basically making a very simple point that humans plus machines are better than machines alone. Now, of course, as everyone is using these advanced automations from Google, the whole point here is that thanks to that 15% lift, experts can still win. But to be able to have that win, you really need to know how to change how you do PPC. And here's how I like to explain this. So Google ads optimization before automation existed looked something like this big bubble, right? The 3 levels of bubble, that's all the Google ad system. And we would spend an inordinate amount of time figuring out keywords, device targeting, messaging, bidding, day parting, adding audiences, all of this detail we would do. And the reason that we would do all of this was because we wanted to get leads, sales, and signups. And obviously we want to get leads because we want new customers, we wanted sales because we want to drive profits, and signups because they drive revenue, right? So we did all this manual work to achieve the ultimate outcome that's on the right side. Now you kind of have to flip that on its head, and you have to say all this detail that we used to do manually, why don't we let Google do this? And this is fundamentally what they're trying to do through smart bidding, responsive search ads, performance max campaigns. But how do we bring our knowledge to that? So the 3 boxes on the left, we can optimize at the periphery of the ad system. And so the types of things that we're going to be optimizing over the next 20 years are going to be very different from the ones that we've optimized over the past 20 years. So we'll be working more on optimization of targets, optimizing conversion data, and optimizing things like structured data that feed into the machine. If you think about performance max campaigns, for example, they rely very heavily on structured data, like a bunch of headline texts, like your data feed, like your local business feed. If those things are not optimized, then Google can only do a subpar job of showing the best ads in the best scenarios to get you the conversions that you want. So all of that is going to be automated, and that's a pretty big mind shift, right? It really changes what it is that we have to do in PPC to be successful. So let me give you some specific examples. One thing, Google did this webinar, and I don't know, a bunch of you probably attended it, but it was their 2022 vision, part of the expert series. And one little bombshell that they dropped was they basically said that target CPA was becoming less important. And some people meant or understood that to mean that target CPA would be going away in 2022. Now, don't worry, target CPA is still going to exist as a smart bidding strategy. However, what Google was really saying was you need to go beyond target CPA because it's an incomplete measure of the value that your campaigns are driving. You really should be thinking about how to move to a target return on ad spend type system. And so even if you do lead gen, you might still want to communicate a little bit more to Google about what those leads are, right? And so if you think about traditional advertising and lead gen, look at that first box on the left. Somebody clicks on an ad and they fill out your form to request some sort of info. That's your lead capture. A lot of advertisers, they kind of stop at that stage because that's what happens online. Now, there's these things that happen in the box on the right side, like an application is started. Say somebody's applying for a mortgage, right? So they start the mortgage application. They complete the application, they submit the application, and then maybe the student enrolls. In this example, it's about a student applying to a school. Now, all the stuff on the right side, that happens offline. So generally, advertisers don't know how to communicate that back to Google. But if you're able to communicate it back and have additional conversion actions for each of these things on the right side, then Google gets better information about what it is that you truly care about, right? And you can do this through a technique of capturing the gclid and then sending the gclid back with additional conversions out of your CRM system. This all sounds really complicated. It is. Google is going to make this easier in 2022. So if you've heard about enhanced conversions, that is a stepping stone towards a system that is much easier to implement this advanced technique that we're showing here. So keep an eye on enhanced conversions because that's going to make this possible for you. Now, if you sell stuff online, you're not, so it's not lead gen, but it's more e-commerce, there's the same type of principle, right? Communicate better what your value is to Google, because that way their automation systems will get you more of the high value that you want. So if somebody buys something from you, a lot of advertisers, they report the conversion value of that basket. But what happens when people return stuff? Or what happens when you figure out that somebody's a high lifetime value customer who will probably come back? You can communicate that back to Google through a methodology called conversion adjustment. I'm extremely surprised because even a lot of e-commerce companies don't know conversion adjustments from Google exist. So just go ahead and search that on the Google search engine. And there's some really interesting information that will explain how you can do this to improve how you report conversions to Google. Now, for many of you listening to the call today, these may be too advanced techniques to start with right away. Luckily, Google has this new technique, which is much easier to implement. You can literally go to the Google interface and set this up for yourself, but it's called value rules. And so you can have indicators about audiences, geolocation, and devices, and you can increase value from each of these if you think one is better than another. So let me give you a simple example. If you do lead gen and you think a lead from California is better than a lead from New York, because you know that the California ones, they actually fill out more of the applications, they get approved at a higher rate, right? That's the stuff that's offline conversions. You may not be communicating that back to Google, but you know about it. You can use a simple value rule to simply say to Google, well, if I get a form fill from California, I'm going to value that higher than a form fill from New York based on my own understanding of what's likely to happen to these conversions, right? And so here's a couple of use cases. I only have 15 minutes, so screenshot this, take a look at it. But these are a couple of use cases depending on what industry you're in. So that's one technique you have. Now, the other one is optimizing automated bids. Most of you are probably using smart bidding of some sort today, and that's automated bidding from Google. But Google keeps saying, like, simplify, simplify, simplify. And many people hear that and they think it means put everything in a single campaign, don't have too many ad groups, right? So all these advanced account structures that we used to have, we shouldn't do anymore. Well, I disagree with that. And actually, Google also disagrees with that. So Google will tell you that if you have different product categories with different margins, right, a different level of profitability for each of those products in that campaign, well, then you probably want to have a different target return on ad spend to get you to the levels of profitability that you care about. Now, this is sort of an alternative to correctly reporting conversions, because keep in mind, when you tell Google that a conversion happened and how much that conversion was worth, most companies send in the basket value. So what was the value of the stuff sold? They don't report the profit of what was sold. So by having different target returns on ad spend, you can actually bring your margin data back into the mix and make sure that you're running profitable ads and not just ads that sell a lot of stuff, but stuff that may not be making you a ton of profit. Now, the other structural thing here is you could do this based on product lines that you have. So Easter decoration versus patio furniture versus car accessories. Well, there's a seasonality aspect to each of these. If you sell Easter decoration and you still have it in your store in May, well, that's a huge loss. That's taking up space. So you probably want to clear that stuff out real quick. So the day after Easter, you want to discount that. So you're going to set a completely different target return on ad spend. But you don't want that target return on ad spend to impact your car accessories, which probably should be selling year round, or patio furniture, which has a different sort of seasonality. So again, the point here is Google may say simplify everything, but you should still think about, well, what business drivers exist for me, and that is going to inform how you should structure things, and then you can layer Google's automation on top of that. So here's a very specific tactic. Google has this optimization score in the Google Ads interface, and they will make suggestions to you. They may say, hey, it looks like this campaign is ready to move to target CPA bidding. Now, the funny thing is that once you're on an automated bidding strategy, Google will never recommend to move to a different smart bidding strategy. And keep in mind, there's something like 9 automated bidding strategies from Google. So once you get into one of them, even if there's a better one that becomes available, Google's not going to tell you about that. That's something that you need to keep an eye on, right? So if you do make that move from target CPA to target ROAS, because you've been starting to contribute value data into Google, that is a good shift to make, but Google will not tell you to do that. So you can take a look at that through something like a rule engine. We have a rule engine, we have auditing systems in Optmyzr, so we can tell you these things. Google will not, but that would be a big fail if you didn't make that transition. And then we also have optimization for automated messaging and ads. And this is a huge topic because responsive search ads are replacing ETAs. ETAs, of course, stands for expanded text ad. And this is the ad where you specify the headline, the description line, and you fully write out the ad. Now, starting at the beginning of Q3 of this year, you will no longer be able to make new expanded text ads. Instead, you're going to make responsive search ads. A responsive search ad is one where you specify up to 15 headline variations and up to 4 descriptions. And then Google will mix and match all of these components based on what it believes is going to be the most relevant ad for that specific user who did that specific search at that time, that day of the week, from that location, and based on all of the other things that Google knows about that user. So we're all going to have to make that shift to responsive search ads. Now, some advertisers are frustrated by that because when we did a look across all of our Optmyzr data, and we manage several billions of dollars of ads per year, so it's pretty significant data. But last year, responsive search ads were outperforming expanded text ads by a good margin, as you can see on the left. But this year, we're seeing that on something like a conversion rate basis, the responsive search ad is about 20% worse than an expanded text ad. And so that's painful because conversion rate is ultimately what most of you care about. Google cares much more about click-through rate, and so RSAs have a higher click-through rate. Higher click-through rate, by the way, that means more money for Google, so Google's happy. But we're unhappy because we get fewer conversions from those clicks that Google's driving, right? So we're all frustrated by these things. Now, the thing is, you have to look slightly more deeply to really understand what's happening. So responsive search ads are really, really good at making sure your ad qualifies for more searches because it can be more relevant. And a more relevant ad has a higher ad rank, and so it qualifies for higher positions on the page. It qualifies to be in more auctions. And so what we looked at in our study that we did in November is we saw that the average responsive search ad has 4.5 times the number of impressions of an expanded text ad. So that's huge. So you have 4.5 times the potential impressions. If you look at conversions, well, responsive search ads drive almost 4 times as many conversions per ad as an expanded text ad. And we measured this many ways. So we measured it when accounts only had ETAs, or when they only had RSAs, or when they had a mix of both. And generally, we see the same thing. RSAs are simply better at getting impressions, and because they're really good at getting more impressions, they also end up getting more conversions, even if they have a lower conversion rate. So this is another huge mind shift that you have to go through. When you're doing ad testing in the old way, you would have looked at a number like conversions per impression, and you would have said, well, listen, the ETA is better because it has more conversions per impression. But people made the false assumption that the number of impressions for an ad group is static. Well, since RSAs got introduced, that's no longer the case. So even in a very conservative estimate, say that the RSA has twice as many impressions as the ETA, while twice as many impressions with a 20% worse conversion rate is still significantly more conversions. And so that's the incrementality story that Google is telling us. And that's the thing that we have to measure, because if we look at it the old way, we're going to make wrong decisions about how we're doing optimization. Now, I'm running out of time, so I've got a bunch more slides that will be shared. But when it comes to pinning, if you really care about how your ad looks, Google introduced the ability to pin multiple pieces of ad text to a single position. And this is actually a sweet spot of control. So Google recommends that you don't pin anything to a position in an RSA. That gives you the best results. If you start pinning, the result drops dramatically. But if you look at the yellow lines, if you pin multiple things to a position, it actually brings back the results to fairly close to no pinning, but it gives you more control, right? So Google is happy because you've given it options for what to show in the ad, but you're also happy because you have a little bit more control of what shows up in this ad. If you have more RSAs, you'll have more conversions, right? So the big question is, how many responsive search ads should I have per ad group? Google recommends 1, sometimes they say 2, but as we measure it, the more RSAs you introduce, the more options the machine learning system has, and the more conversions you will drive. Also, the same thing with more headlines. People ask, should I really have 15 headline variations? And we say yes, the more headlines you have, generally the more conversions you will drive from those ads. So it is worth expanding your advertising as much as you can. Google gives you 2 measures to help you with the optimization of these, and this is how you can unlevel the playing field for you by understanding what this means. The ad strength indicator has no relation to performance. Understand that for a second. Most people I talk to do not understand this. The ad strength is not based on performance. It is a prediction by Google based on best practices about what's likely to happen. So if you are running an ad and it has great performance, Google may still tell you it has poor ad strength, and that's okay. Don't worry about it. It is a best practice guideline to try to get you to do the right thing. But what you need to look at is the asset labels. So look after the ad is running. These asset labels are based on performance. This is the lever you should be using for optimization. This is the thing that's based on how the ad has been doing in real life, not the prediction that Google's machines made, which are often wrong. This is based on real data. So this is what you should be using. So with that, those are a couple of ways that you can improve your performance and hopefully tilt the playing field back towards you and unlevel it once again.
Thanks, Fred. We are now jumping over to Andrea.
Hello, hi everyone. Let's see if I can move the slide. Try, yeah, maybe yes. Maybe I did it already too many times. Ah, okay. Cool. So that's my screen. Okay, interesting. All right, so welcome and very happy to be here. Today we're going to go through the upcoming trends in SEO as far as I can see. I'm not in control of the slides at the moment.
Let me fix that for you real quick.
It's been a while since last time I was with you guys.
A little tricky, little technical difficulties here.
That's fine, that's fine.
Almost.
Almost there.
There we go. All right.
All right, let's see. Let me try now. Ooh. Not sure if I'm moving, but yeah. So I'm Andrea Volpini, co-founder and CEO of WordLift. We work on automating search engine optimization by building knowledge graphs. And let's say next slide. Still okay. So one of the trends that we're betting on, and that you know, I believe it's important to consider is you know, how multimodal we are going in terms of Google. That it's becoming more and more capable of you know, working across different modalities. But at the same time, it's also an evolution of the way in which users start to interact with system. So just a very quick introduction: a multimodal system in search. It's a search engine that can work with various modalities, and that means that, you know, I can start you know, by sending an image as a query, and this is one of the, you know, activities that we've been doing at WordLift to leverage on the structured data that we create for improving the visibility on Google, and use it for internal search engine on e-commerce site. And so one way in which we can start looking at SEO is that you know, we are going to see more and more users coming into these you know, scenarios of shooting photos and then looking for the results. and this is going to be a pattern that then we expect to see also inside on-site search. Two modalities is when we start to augment the query by combining, for instance, an image, like in this case, with a string of text. And so in this specific example, I am sending address to this multimodal search engine that we developed. And so, the first results appear, but then I, further refine the query by providing an additional text, like this is red. And therefore, the search engine, combines the two indication inside one single vector space and provides me with refined results that come out of these two modalities. So in general, how does this translate into SEO? Well, on one side, we can start to train Google in order to recognize our content by providing more media assets that are marked up with semantic meanings using structured data. And of course, we can also start to increase the quantity and the quality of the images that we publish in order to help Google learn more about our products, learn more about landmarks or specific features. So I started to do some tests, and this is one of the tests that I successfully completed in December. So this is a very beautiful graffiti in Munich in front of the publishing house that we work with. And when I arrived there, of course, I started to make a query with Google Lens about this beautiful image, and it didn't appear. The publisher websites and the articles related to these beautiful painting didn't appear in the first place, and we actually had Alamy and other sites that were ranking on the top of Google Lenses. So I involved the publisher, and I started to shoot more photos, and I give the photos to the publisher with free credits to use it, and then we worked together on optimizing a few pages that were presenting these images, and then I started to increase the structured data, and then after a few months I was able to make these web page rank to the top. So that's a little bit of the structured data behind it. It's a subset, but of course, as you can see, we are combining a lot of property behind the image, and we're linking the image with the article behind it, and then we are adding also information about the entity of Georg Elzer that has been it's represented in the Morales. So Google gets more understanding of the the image, and then of course it's able to get the confidence for ranking. That's one topic. A second topic, another trend, conversational AI. I do expect to see more conversational user interfaces as we move forward, and that means that on one side, again, we can start working on creating and building conversational user interfaces on our website, and on the other side, we can also start thinking that search engines are becoming more conversational. And so in general, building content that works for a chatbot, it's something that it makes total sense because Google itself is becoming more conversational. So this is another experiment that I've been running now for quite some time, and it uses BlenderBot. Now BlenderBot 2, it's one of these open domain virtual agent developed by a team that works in Facebook AI laboratory. And it's interesting because BlenderBot 2 relies on the results coming out of either Google or Bing, and in this case, I'm using Google. So we can start to evaluate the SEO efforts that we're making by using these technologies and understand how something like a conversational AI will interpret the content that we're publishing. And so here you can see kind of a quick conversation between me and Blenderboard 2, where I start asking, what is conversational AI, and it's a form of artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth. So this is interesting for two aspects. One, because there is a lot of the content that we are producing already that has, the potential of becoming conversational. Think about, frequently asked question and the structured data that goes with these Q&A. Think about the feature snippets. Most of these pieces of content already can get featured by the Google Assistant and are already somehow ready for conversational user interfaces. So my advice is to start looking more and more at your content with the eyes of a potential chatbot or a conversational user interface. But at the same time, also keep in mind that by introducing Google Mom, Google is also enabling features on the SERP that are helping us explore and discover content, and we want to provide all the support for Google to create these interactions. So here it's an example where the search starts with something generic as the name of a podcast, CUI Tuesday, and then Google is suggesting to look at the upcoming event for CUI Tuesday, which I was not aware of, and this is a past event. Now, this means that as we structure data and we provide more information to the search engine is able to create these interaction patterns that are advanced, but they are still driving, of course, a lot of interaction and clicks. And we can see also this happening on other features like the site links, where as we know, site links is a feature that Google adapts based on the click stream and the queries that people make, but it's also a way for Google to entice the searcher in kind of discovering more content. And so this functionality, it's triggered by using structured data, and it's triggered by organizing content in what we define as the entity-based content model. So a content model that it's organized with entities. And in this specific example, of course, the main entity is the event, and then the speakers of the event, and then of course there are other ancillary entities that are connected and that help the search engine understand what we're talking about and how to enable features like topic zooming, which is what we've seen in the previous example. So creating a consistent content model that uses entities inside your own graph and structured data, it's a way to help the search engine gain the confidence for enabling these advanced features. On-site search is also something that we reckon to become more and more important, because of course as a user adapts to a more advanced semantic search on Google and Bing, of course we want to kind of bring back these value on the website. And so we are actively working in WordLift to enable this functionality of neural search on top of the existing knowledge graph that we create. Again, it's always working on the two sides of the coin. SEO in 2022 is going to be more and more not just about Google, but about curating the metadata for Google and for whatever AI strategy we want to put in place inside our own organization. Another, and so the last trend that I highly recommend to bet on is to start considering the climate change and how you can improve the code of your website and the way in which the website is developed in order to decrease the global greenhouse gas emission. Now, we might get to the point that this could become a signal for Google as well. I mean, Google is already enabling features inside Google Maps to, for instance, guide you to make, you know, the greener path, or to take the greener path when asking for direction. And I don't see too distant the time where Google will start considering if your website it's carbon neutral or not. And of course, there is a lot of things that you can do in order to reduce the emission of your website. But one very simple thing is to start auditing the emission of your website. There are tools out there that do that for you. And of course, moving into a sustainable cloud infrastructure is also something very basic that we can do. And I was in the beginning surprised to learn that 3.7 of the global greenhouse emissions are really related to what we do, the internet habits, the websites. And so there is a lot that we can do, and I see that SEO will become pivotal in making this change happen in the coming months. And that's all I have for you today, and we can either move to Mike, if Mike is here, or go through the questions.
Thanks, Andrea. I just want to let the audience know Mike was unable to join us, and so we are going to jump into the questions, which is good because you can ask more questions. We have more time for that. So I am going to turn this over to Heather so that she can go through them.
All right, hi everyone. Let's get started. So our first question is, why does Google allow so many ads on the first page results?
Because they make more money that way. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where that question's coming from. If there's an undertone of unhappiness, if you're mostly been focused on SEO, of course, if you're an advertiser, then it's great to see more ads on the page because it gives you more real estate. But ultimately, I think Google is just trying to strike a balance between monetizing their pages, which takes ads, but still also giving relevant results, right? So that's why we tend to see lots of ads, but they also tend to be quite useful. I think that's really the only answer that I can think of.
Yeah, and definitely there is the business model of Google. It's going in that direction, and yeah, it's a trend, and I don't see this trend changing in 2022.
Nice. Okay, so the next question is for Frederick. I believe you already answered this, Frederick, but if you could just give your answer again to the so all the attendees can hear. But the question was, regarding bid optimization strategies, when would you recommend to use TROAs versus RCPAs and vice versa?
Right, so this was Katie's question. So I said in the chat that target return on ad spend is almost always better because there's a value component to it. And let me explain this one other way, right? So again, if you're in a system where you tend to target leads and you think about a target cost per acquisition of a lead, you haven't really had to communicate value to Google. But the fact is that a lead turns into a sales qualified lead, a marketing qualified lead, and eventually, hopefully, a customer. And each of those stages of that lead has a different value to your business. The sale, that could be a $5,000 contract, right? So that's the value is $5,000. The value of the lead stage is much less because you've kind of baked in the fact that maybe only 10% of leads turn into customers. So you value the lead at $500 in that case. The more that you can indicate to Google when a lead goes through those stages and associate different values to it, that enables you to start doing target return on ad spend bidding. And so the beauty of that is now if Google is faced with a budget limitation from your end and they can buy one more click and they have to decide between buying the click that's likely to become a lead, that's highly likely to become a customer versus the click becoming a lead and probably not becoming a customer, while if you didn't tell them which of the leads tends to become customers and have higher value down the line, Google doesn't know what to do. So it's going to flip a coin, and it may very well give you the lead that doesn't turn into new business. So that's why TROAS is always better. I would always try to move from TCPA to TROAS. If you don't have the capability to indicate value to Google, then you can still use TCPA. And then, of course, if you get into a scenario where you're doing automated bidding and maybe for some reason your campaign volume drops significantly, at that point, Google may be making worse predictions, and it may be a good time to back off and go back to manual bidding while you sort of figure out what is it that's causing the drop in volume, restore that, and then go back to smart bidding and ideally TROAS.
All right, nice. And so the next question is the chatbot paradigm desired by users in already a frustrated frame of mind?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think that chatbot, it's a touch point, and it's part of a broader customer journey. Of course, on one side, we have organizations that are pushing for automating marketing tasks, but at the same time, of course, it only works if these automation really create value for the end user. So it is very complicated to kind of automate a customer relationship with a chatbot. It's not something that it's immediate and does require a lot of planning. But when we're able to be there with the right answer, and that's not easy, but when we can do that, then we create a tremendous value for any organization and for the user as well. Because of course, if the answer is what I'm looking for, then I'm satisfied, regardless of if it's a human behind or if it's a chatbot. So yeah, we have to plan carefully, but at the same time, this is an SEO trend, which means that we also have to prepare our content to go more conversational, because Google is also going in that way, and we see, of course, a lot more of long tail intents that needs to be covered, and these are perfectly suited for a conversational user interface.
Okay. And the next question is, what is the best way to start a new campaign? Is it eCPC or max clicks or another way?
Right, so this question from Lawrence is about the bidding strategy that you should choose at the beginning of a new campaign. So the good news is that Google's machine learning has gotten much better, so that even if you don't have a lot of conversion data of your own, they can still make predictions about likely conversion rates based on industry data, other websites that they've seen. So with shopping campaigns, for example, you could start with a fully automated target return on ad spend from the get-go, or something like maximize conversion value. I don't love max clicks, because how do you get the most clicks for a given budget? The answer is always to buy the cheapest clicks possible. That's what maximizes the number of clicks. And clicks on Google tend to be cheap because more sophisticated advertisers have already qualified those clicks as just not being as valuable, not as likely to lead to actual sales and conversions. So that's why I'm always hesitant to recommend maximize clicks. I think eCPC is a fine starting point as well. So eCPC is basically enhanced CPC. And that's a way for you to indicate to Google what you think the value of a cost of a click will be. You have to do this based on predicted conversion rates, based on what you know about your business. And the enhanced portion of that name, enhanced CPC, means that Google can use its own data about likely conversion rates based on device types, based on time of day, to increase or decrease that starting bid that you set. So use smart bidding if you can, eCPC second, max clicks third.
Okay, and the next question is from Mateo. Can one manually tell Google when a lead becomes a customer? For example, the lead gets converted into a customer offline.
Yes, Mateo, so you can do that. I mean, manually would simply mean that you tell Google, here's the click ID that I captured right when that user filled in the form for the very first time, and when I put them into my CRM. You look at your form fill and then you call that customer. at some point, or you call that lead becomes a customer. Now you can go into Google and basically upload a teeny tiny little spreadsheet with 2 rows of data, one which is this click ID, and this is the conversion that came from it, so it became a sale. So yes, in a way you can do this manually. Ideally, of course, you want to set up some automations around it, so that's where tools like Optmyzr and Zapier will really come in handy. But there's also good news. So if you haven't been able to capture the GCLID, the Google Click ID, Google is now working with enhanced conversions. And in that sort of a system, all you really need to know is the email address of the user. So obviously, you know the email address once someone becomes a customer of yours. So that would be the only piece of data you have to feed back to Google manually to tell them that the lead became a customer.
All right, and the next question is, it seems as if the educated business owner who is able to do his own PPC is really on such a steep learning curve that he can't be successful at it. Your thoughts on this? Are there easy ways to learn all this stuff?
Yeah, Vernon, I feel for you. I completely agree with you. It is challenging. I mean, the whole beauty of Google Ads was it's simple and anyone can do it, but the reality is 20 years down the line, there's a lot of complexity and obviously a lot of nuance that you won't get unless you've been spending years doing this and you do it for a living. A little bit of good news, Optmyzr, my company, we just introduced Optmyzr Lite. So if you go to optmyzr.com/lite, L-I-T-E, we do have a new offering for up and coming businesses. And it includes audits, reports, some optimization suggestions. And that's honestly a good way to start learning, right? So you have your campaigns running. We'll point out things that you could have probably done differently or better to get better results. I would also probably look at the Performance Max campaign from Google because that gets you across their 6 primary channels, anything from search, display, maps, YouTube, discovery, and Gmail. And it'll automatically put your ads in those right places when Google thinks it's going to give you results. They're going to give you some insights along with that, right? So to help you get educated. But the reality is, you're better off today than you were 5 years ago, when chances are if you would have set something up in Google, you probably would have definitely failed. And definitely is probably not the right way to, but you had a very good chance you would have failed. I think nowadays, your chances are pretty good of having average results with automation. And then if you like these average results and that's growing your business, that's when I would just invest in an agency, in hiring someone into your company who knows this much better. Or if you enjoy doing it yourself, like make that a bigger part of your role. I also really enjoy searchengineland.com. That is a great place to keep up with all the latest in the industry. So check that out.
Awesome.
And Vernon is asking a follow-up question. So what PPC ad spend is realistically needed to get results? That kind of depends on your industry, right? So Vernon, if you're a lawyer, expect to pay upwards of $100 per click. So you're obviously going to need multiple thousands of dollars to start getting some results and to start measuring something that you can optimize. If you're in more modest industries, then a couple of dollars per click is probably reasonable. But yeah, I mean, $1,000 per month budget is probably your minimum starting point to be able to get some velocity towards having the automated machine learning systems figure it out for you and drive some good results.
All right. Next question is from Hannah. What bid strategy would you recommend for a service-based business?
So if you're a service-based business, Hannah, then you're probably looking to get leads to start using your service. So the natural one that comes to mind is target CPA. But like I've been hammering on this whole presentation, that is your starting point. You should really aspire to go to target return on ad spend. My business, I sell PPC optimization software. So I care about getting leads, but I don't really care about getting leads. I care about leads that become customers. So I would have a multi-stage strategy of communicating that to Google. So I would want to tell Google whenever somebody signed up for a trial or signed up for a demo, but I would also want to feed back data about when my sales team actually gave that demo. and whether we thought that that prospect was qualified, right? And start putting in these additional little nuggets of information and these additional values that we start to notice, so that I could move to a target return on ad spend type bidding model.
All right, and the next question. In 2022, can we focus more on structures data? Is it very beneficial for SEO?
Yeah, I think that I sell a tool that creates structured data, so of course I'm biased. But the reality is that over these last 5 years that we've been involved in adding structured data on thousands of websites, we had the opportunity to gather also the impact. And of course, depending on the industry and the type of, the level of competition and also the type of features that you have, you can expect a double-digit growth on organic traffic when you do it properly within the course of 1 to 2 months. And that means that in most cases it pays off. Now, an interesting part, and that's more a question that I have for Fred, is how does it benefit the PPC? Because that's something that I'm also willing to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I think structured data is a big trend across the board, right? And SEO, like you're saying, has been sort of the leader in that, the semantic web and all of those cool things. But what's nice is that you can take that same structured data and then leverage it for your ad campaigns. And so we have a capability. We built some scripts and we turned it into some tools. It's called a campaign automator. So you could take your structured data about the services that you offer and the cities in which you offer those services or the products that you sell. And rather than giving those to Google and letting them figure everything out and just automatically create ads where you have no control, you can feed it through a template that you control and will automatically generate multiple campaigns, all the ad groups, keywords, etc. And that's not necessarily like the only thing that you would do, but all of these are incremental to each other, right? So have a search campaign that you manually created and have a search campaign that's using your structured data, and then use an automatic campaign from Google, like a dynamic search ads campaign or a performance max campaign. Because even with performance max, I mean, Google is saying that it's a 13% incremental conversions for people who've already been running search campaigns. And so, we've been doing search marketing for so long that sometimes it feels like there's no more potential for growing the business. But yeah, 13% on top of what we've already been doing, that's significant, right? So I would just layer all of these things, and the structured data is a big part of that.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because also, I mean, this year I've been working on the Web Almanac and the chapter for structured data. So I had the opportunity to review a lot of, millions of sites that are using structured data. And one aspect that seems to emerge is that, again, structured data is not just for Google. It's a way in which we organize the metadata around our content. And PPC seems to be, one of these areas where you can actually reuse the data in order to, improve your campaign or guide, a tool like yours to, do the campaign for you by reusing this metadata.
Exactly. And we see some really sophisticated customers who are basically treating this as their first-party data, something about their business. And so, you start from, here's the products that I saw, but now you can start to layer in things like, what's my margin? What's my average time to close the deal? And so that's really proprietary, but you can take those things and then you can start putting them into like recipes and rules and automated rule engine type things, where you leverage that first-party insight and you kind of point the machines in the right direction. Here's another example of structured data, like the weather. That exists as structured data, like what's the weather in this city, what's the temperature? We're all complaining it's so cold across the country right now. Well, what does that mean for you if you sell car batteries? You're probably selling a lot more than usual because car batteries tend to die when it gets really cold, right? If you could have a bidding strategy that's tying into that structured data that says, oh, listen, tomorrow it's going to be the coldest it's ever been in Michigan. We might want to boost up our budget and our bids for car batteries. Google's not going to do that for you. They don't know the correlation between car battery sales and temperature, and they might be able to. They could figure it out. They've got millions of different advertisers. Are they really looking at that aspect of it, or is that your unique value proposition, what you know as a business owner? And so how do you take that structured data back into optimizing anything from your SEO to your PPC campaigns?
Yeah, that's really fascinating area, Fred. I will come back to you directly. I want to learn more, but yeah, the point of first party data, structured data is your first party data. The more you build on it, the more you can kind of build system, and whether it's a chatbot or it's a semantic search engine or the way to optimize your PPC campaign, I think it's going to be an important area.
All right. So the last question, let's see. So the last question we can do is, do you think there are any trends that some people focus on that may be hyped up or exaggerated or overblown that won't actually end up being that big of a deal?
Oh boy. Go, Fred.
Artificial intelligence. So, I mean, there's these buzzwords, right? And I think artificial intelligence is really huge, and it is really causing a big shift in how things work. But I would be very cautious when you work with a vendor, because every vendor you go to today, or every consultant you go to today, or anyone you do business with, they're like, yes, we use artificial intelligence to blah, blah, blah. That's usually a lot of hype. In many cases, you don't need to use those really advanced technologies to still get good results. I mean, you could use simple statistics, which is kind of a subset of artificial intelligence, but you don't need to invest millions of dollars like Google is doing to boost your own results. And we call that whole concept automation layering, right? So let the big companies like Google invest millions of dollars, thousands of people to build these really cool automations. And there was another question, and it was kind of like Jean-Michel, he was saying, even if you do an automated bidding like target CPA bidding, you might want to put a limit on the upper amount of the cost per click that you're willing to accept. That's a simple automation layer, right? So, and that's you as a human putting your knowledge of what is a reasonable cost per click on top of Google's machine learning. So yeah, I think the biggest overhyped trend is artificial intelligence.
Yeah, also, I mean, it's a buzzword, so I mean, it needs to be properly disambiguated and turned into, small action that create an impact. I think for many years we've been hearing on the rise of voice search, and this is kind of, one of these trends that now, it's embedded in everyday's life, because a lot of people are indeed talking with Google Assistant or Alexa. But it's still, one of these areas where it's very hard to bet, because of course measuring the impact of voice search is still hard, and so this is kind of one of the area where it's hard to make a move. Whether thinking in terms of, well, maybe I could start building my conversational user interfaces. It seems complicated, but then in the end it turns to be one of the many ways in which you can connect with your audience. And whether you're building something simple like allowing people to more quickly access to white papers or Q&As, this can create value and don't cost like millions of dollars. So yeah, working with simple things definitely helps.
I am going to bust in here now because we are at the 1 o'clock point, and I know everyone is busy and trying to do so many other things. If we didn't get to your question, don't worry, we can forward it on to Fred and Andrea for answering. And if you have further questions, you can always email us at support@mainstreetroi.com. Just want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar, and thanks to Fred and Andrea for all of the great information. And as a reminder, we're definitely sending out the replay and the PDF of slides, so look out for that in your email. And we look forward to seeing everyone again at our next marketing webinar. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.